The late 15th century in England was a realm defined by turmoil and the bloody struggle for the crown, known as the Wars of the Roses. For years, the House of York and the House of Lancaster had savaged each other for the right to rule. King Edward V of the House of York had finally brought a period of fragile peace to the kingdom with his decisive victories. His reign, though contested, seemed to promise a new era of stability for a weary nation. Edward was a charismatic and formidable ruler, known for both his military prowess and his indulgent lifestyle. His controversial marriage to the commoner, Elizabeth Woodville, a widow with her own children, had created a powerful and often resented court faction. The old nobility viewed the Queen's family, the Woodvilles, with suspicion and jealousy. But the future of the Yorkist dynasty seemed secure with Edward's two young sons, Prince Edward and Prince Richard. Then, in the spring of 1483, the unexpected happened. King Edward IV, still in his prime at the age of 40, fell gravely ill. His sudden sickness shocked the court and the nation. On his deathbed, he attempted to reconcile the rival factions at court, pleading for unity. Named his trusted brother, Richard, Duke of Gloucester, as Lord Protector of the realm. Richard was to govern until the young Prince Edward, now Edward Face, came of age. On April 9th, 1483, King Edward IV died, plunging the kingdom back into uncertainty. The new king, Edward Faith, was a boy of just 12 years old. He was at Ludlow Castle on the Welsh border when his father passed away. His mother's family, the Woodvilles, quickly moved to assert their influence over the young monarch. They organized for him to travel to London for his coronation, surrounded by their own men. Richard, Duke of Gloucester, was in the north of England when he received the news of his brother's death. He immediately began to ride south, gathering his own loyal retainers. Richard believed the Woodvilles were plotting to sideline him and seize power for themselves. On April 30th, 1483, Richard intercepted the young king's party at Stony Stratford. He arrested the king's uncle, Earl Rivers, and his half-brother, Sir Richard Grey. Richard assured his distressed nephew that this was necessary to secure the kingdom. He took control of the young king and escorted him towards London himself. When news of Richard's actions reached the capital, panic ensued. Queen Elizabeth Woodville, fearing for her family's safety, fled into the sanctuary of Westminster Abbey. She took with her the younger prince, 9-year-old Richard, Duke of York. The elder prince, Edward Fate, was lodged in the Tower of London, the traditional residence for monarchs awaiting coronation. At first, this was seen as a normal procedure, a prelude to his crowning. But Richard's consolidation of power continued at a ruthless pace. He accused Lord Hastings, a powerful nobleman loyal to the young king, of treason. Hastings was dragged from the council chamber and executed without trial. This brutal act sent a clear message to any who might oppose the Lord Protector. Next, Richard turned his attention to the younger prince still in sanctuary. He argued that the young Duke of York should be with his brother in the Tower to keep him company. On June 16th, under immense pressure and surrounded by troops, Elizabeth Woodville reluctantly released her son. The 9-year-old prince was taken to join his brother in the Tower of London. Now, both of Edward IV's male heirs were securely under Richard's control. The stage was set for Richard's final, audacious move. A sermon was preached at St. Paul's Cross, a public pulpit in London. The preacher, a man named Ralph Shaw, declared that Edward IV's marriage to Elizabeth Woodville had been invalid. He claimed Edward had a pre-contract of marriage to another woman, Lady Eleanor Butler. Under the canon law of the time, this would make his subsequent marriage bigamous and void. If the marriage was void, then all of their children, including the two princes, were illegitimate. This shocking proclamation stripped the boys of their claim to the throne. Parliament was hastily assembled and passed an act known as the Titulus Regius. This act officially enshrined the prince's illegitimacy into law. With Edward IV's children declared bastards, the crown passed to the next in line. Richard, Duke of Gloucester, died due. On July 6, 1483, Richard was crowned King Richard III in a lavish ceremony at Westminster Abbey. Meanwhile, the two young princes remained in the Tower. They were seen occasionally in the summer of 1483, playing in the Tower gardens. An Italian visitor named Dominic Mancini wrote that they were seen less and less frequently. They were moved to the inner apartments of the Tower, deeper into the fortress. Then they vanished from sight completely. No one ever recorded seeing the princes alive again. What happened to them became the most enduring mystery in English history. The most immediate and long-standing suspect has always been their uncle, King Richard III. The argument against him is one of cold, political logic. As long as the princes lived, they were a threat to his reign. Even if declared illegitimate, they could become figureheads for rebellion. Richard had the motive, the means, and the opportunity to eliminate them. He controlled the Tower of London, and the boys were in his custody. Tudor historians, writing after Richard's death, certainly painted him as a monstrous villain. Sir Thomas More's account, though written decades later, claims Richard ordered their murder. More alleged that Richard tasked Sir James Tyrrell with the dark deed. According to this story, the princes were smothered in their sleep by Tyrrell's men. Their bodies were then said to have been buried secretly within the Tower. However, there is no contemporary evidence from 1483 that explicitly accuses Richard of murder. The rumors began to swirl most intensely after he was defeated. This has led some historians to question the traditional narrative. They suggest other individuals also had motives to want the princes gone. One alternative suspect is Henry Stafford, the Duke of Buckingham. Buckingham was initially Richard's staunchest ally, instrumental in his rise to power. Yet, just a few months into Richard's reign, Buckingham launched a massive rebellion against him. Could he have murdered the princes and tried to frame Richard to advance his own claim to the throne? His rebellion failed, and Richard had him executed for treason in November 1483. A more compelling alternative suspect is the man who ultimately profited from Richard's downfall, Henry Tudor. Henry Tudor, later King Henry's ascendant, had a very distant and weak claim to the throne. He defeated Richard III at the Battle of Bosworth Field in 1485. Richard was killed in the battle, the last English king to die in combat. Henry Tudor became King Henry VII, founding a new dynasty. If the princes were still alive when Henry took power, they would have been a catastrophic threat to his rule. His claim was far weaker than theirs, even if they were considered illegitimate by some. It is argued that Henry VII had the princes quietly murdered after he took the Tower. He never produced the boys, dead or alive, to either prove their deaths or celebrate their survival. He also passed an act of Parliament condemning Richard III, but was curiously silent on the specific crime of murder. The uncertainty surrounding the prince's fate directly fueled challenges to Henry's reign. A young boy named Lambert Simnel was put forward, claiming to be a Yorkist heir. Henry VII defeated this rebellion easily and put the boy to work in the royal kitchens. A more serious threat came from a young man named Perkin Warbeck. Warbeck claimed to be Richard, Duke of York, the younger of the two lost princes. His claim was convincing enough to gain support from several European rulers. For years, he was a thorn in Henry VII's side. a living embodiment of the mystery. Eventually, Warbeck was captured, and after trying to escape, he was executed in 1499. The Tudor dynasty was finally secure, but the question of the princes remained. Centuries passed, and the story became a fixed part of English folklore. Then, in 1674, a discovery was made that seemed to solve the puzzle. Workmen found a wooden chest buried beneath the staircase. Inside the chest were the skeletons of two small children. At the time, it was assumed these were the remains of the lost princes. King Charles II ordered that the bones be given a royal burial. They were interred in an urn in Westminster Abbey, where they remain to this day. 1933. The bones were examined by modern scientists. The examination concluded they were the bones of two boys of the correct age. However, the methods of the time were limited, and the findings have been disputed. Requests for new, definitive DNA testing have so far been denied. So, the identity of the bones in the urn remains unproven. The case against Richard III is strong, but entirely circumstantial. The case against Henry VII is logical, but lacks any direct testimony. The guilt of the Duke of Buckingham seems unlikely, but not impossible. Did Richard III, the loyal brother and protector, succumb to ambition and murder his own blood? Or was he a victim of a brilliant smear campaign by the victorious Tudors? Did the princes survive Richard's reign only to be quietly dispatched by his successor? Could one of them have truly escaped to challenge the Tudor throne? After more than 500 years, the mystery endures. The story of the princes in the tower continues to fascinate and horrify. It is a dark fairy tale written in the cold stone of the tower and the blood of kings. Without a confession, a witness, or definitive DNA, the final truth remains lost to time. The silence of the two young princes is the most powerful testimony of all.